Let's ride them waves into insanity. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Movie Emporium spoiler-filled discussion of The Surfer, the newest film from director Lorcan Finnegan. Okay, guys, this will have spoilers. This will be my interpretation of this movie, so you may be different. So I'm glad. I'm most interested to hear your comments on what you think is going on in this movie. But just know this is how I feel what's going on in The Surfer. So I was not expecting to have to do a Surfer spoiler discussion or something of that nature. I thought it was going to be just a movie that was going to be interesting, very Nicolas Cage and esque. But the more and more I watch this movie, the more and more I realize that there is a lot going into this movie. There's a lot of interpretations. There's a lot of ambiguity that happens in this movie, especially at the end. So it's a movie about a guy played by Nicolas Cage called the Surfer who brings his son to his childhood home in Australia to go surfing, as well as buy the house that he used to live in on the beach. Well, this group called the Bad Boys just deny him from doing that, and he ends up being tortured and humiliated and basically put through a lot of psycho analysis and stuff like that when it comes to his psyche and what he is, as he starts losing everything, including his car, including his cell phone, his ring, all that good stuff. He's dealing with, of course, the bank, trying to buy the house. He's also trying to deal with his wife, who wants to divorce. And it becomes a breakdown and a kind of intense look into a man who starts to lose everything. And what does that do on the psyche of an individual? That's what The Surfer is in a nutshell. And it has a very unhinged Nicolas Cage performance, as he is known for doing. So a movie like this is a movie that is not going to be for everyone. It's a movie that is definitely going for a very interesting feel and very interesting take. It's a movie that I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I knew Nicolas Cage has been picking projects that have kind of leaned into his attributes as an actor. And he's also in this phase of his career where he's finding stuff that is really interesting, whether it be Pig, Mandy, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, or whatever that movie is, or The Unbearable Lightness of Mass Talent, or whatever that movie is called. It's really interesting what he is willing to do and what he is capable of doing, because he still goes into that schlocky VOD stuff, but a lot of it has to do with he needs to pay his taxes and stuff like that. But when he goes and does films like this, I'm truly intrigued, because it means that he is leaning into some really psychotherapy, psychodrama type of material, and it uses it to his strengths. So here comes my spoiler-filled interpretation of this movie. You know, if you should watch the movie if you're interested, but no, it's not going to be for everyone. I think this movie is about how our past truly affects our future, how we look at our past to, in essence, want something that we can't have anymore. And when it's taken away from us, we feel such remorse, we feel such anger for it, that we feel like the past is treating us like a redheaded stepchild, to be fairly honest. And the really interesting parts about this, and it goes into much more detail with like masculinity and the nature of like who we are on a humanity and metaphysical level, is the watching this guy spiral out of control, the surfer guy who has no name, is Nicolas Cage's character. Watching him turn into this like beach bum / chaotic evil, chaotic mess of a character who feels like he's tormented by these individuals when they're literally just telling him, dude, this is not your country anymore. This is not your place. You don't belong here anymore. And it's true. He doesn't belong here anymore, because he moved on with a wife and a kid, and he should be focused on that. He should not be focused on the world of surfing. You know, that should be something he goes to, like a place where, you know, you have fun. You shouldn't be worried about a house, you know, that you really shouldn't be affording. And it's a lot of how we want to live in our past, how we have our midlife crisis and we want to buy all this stuff, and we want to buy our past, and we want to buy all this stuff. It's like the collectors wanting to buy video games again. There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes there's a limit to what you need as a human being. And on top of everything, it really shows that, you know, these surfer guys, I guess you consider bad guys. You know, Scaly is played by Julian McMahon, who of course is considered the bad guy in this movie. But it really feels like it's a psyche look into Nicolas Cage's past. It looks like what he wants to be instead of who he should be. And so therefore it looks into a world where he's not capable of understanding that you just have to be you have to move on. You can't be what you want, you know. And then on top of that, he's dealing with some psychodrama with his father who is dead, and then on top of that he's dealing with the people who own the house because he wants to buy this house, and they're like, dude, you have no money. It's like, what are you doing? We have people who are willing to buy who have the money, and it looks into that world of just like chaotic uncertainty when you live in a world where it just things are not for you anymore. And I find that fascinating because we're so hinged on looking to our past to live our past that we don't look into our present. And watching him kind of slowly spiral out of control is what happens when you're an individual who's not willing to just not relent. When you don't relent, it comes back and it ruins you and it takes everything from you. And that's what these surfer guys are. It's like his barrier to his psychoanalysis of who he is and what he is. And he's a guy that he doesn't see what he has in front of him, and it ruins his self-worth. And he's willing to give like his ring to a bunch of kids to answer a phone that is completely broken, or give his wallet or his cell phone to the guy just to get a cup of coffee or drink water. He's a guy who's just not willing to present himself into a world that it's left him behind, to be fairly honest. And then you look at the beach bum, the guy who lives out of his car. That's what he's slowly turning into. He's turning into a guy that's just losing all self-control, that is not willing to move past what he can't have anymore. And it really strikes a nerve to him, and like how he pays it off at the end is up to interpretation. You watch him with the people and how they look at him as like this crazy guy, and how they're like laughing at him and stuff like that. It's mind into a mentally unstable guy who can't just move on, to be fairly honest. That's kind of how I feel about it. But it's also about how much we're willing to sacrifice for what we truly want, and are we willing to sacrifice everything for that? And is it worth it in the end? As we see, like, this is a guy who goes down this terrible path. It goes down this very sadly pathetic path, and he gets to the point where he's accepted by the bad boys or whatever they're called, and it's really not anything that great. This guy, the main bad guy, the Scally character, he's a guy that is just kind of surface level. He has a lot of weird kind of analogies. He's not very fun to be around, to be fairly honest. He's a guy that's running a cult, but he's also a guy that feels like he is part of Nicolas Cage's psyche. So whether he's real or not is a truly interesting kind of concept, especially with the ending and stuff like that. And once again, it does lead into the masculinity and the nature. Apparently, this is a thing I read about, but apparently Australian culture can be really kind of difficult to deal with when it comes to its looks and feels with bro culture, and like how forceful it can be, and how tempting to use people it is and stuff like that. Which, once again, I've never been to Australia, so I can't tell you if that's true or not, but I hear a lot of stories about it. But, once again, it's like the kid disappears, and then, these guys feel like they're kind of like the surfer, Nicolas Cage character's like psyche when it comes to like his mental state. Like the police officer can be like a level of like, authority that he doesn't want to have, and then like the main bad guy could be like him trying to deal with his like not being like full, what he feels like a full male, and it just then you have the other guys who feel like his passion for like his past and stuff like that. And then the beach mom's like kind of where he's this guy who is just never gone past his past and stuff like that. And it's just, there's a lot of levels of like derangement syndrome when it comes to like what he is, what the surfer guy is, and what he wants. And it leads to this really interesting conclusion. He's accepted into the bad boy, so his psyche is officially broken, and he's kind of reborn into this kind of like bro culture. But then it kind of spirals out of control, where we see like the Scally guy having like relations with a young kid, with a very like teenage girl. It's all about drug culture, drinking, dancing, fighting with one another. And then it leads to this ending where it basically, they burn down the beach bum's car, and then Nicolas Cage's son pops up, the surfer's son pops up, which is kind of out of the blue, because the son just kind of is, where's he been? Like, what? It's just very weird, like what's going on. But they go down to the beach, they're gonna go surfing, and that's when the beach bum pops up. Nicolas Cage's surfer character sees him. The guy freaks out because he has a gun, which we've seen earlier. that Nicolas Cage had. He put bullets in it and he's fired it. And I think he actually killed the dog, or it's his dog. I don't entirely know. But it leads him down to the beach where the beach bum confronts him and lets all of what you could say the psyche portions of Nicolas Cage's surfer character loose, leaving only the scaly Nicolas Cage surfer and his son. But it allows Nicolas Cage's surfer character to go out to the waves, go out to the beach, and relive a time where he felt most happiest. But in the process, it's almost like this beach bum is killing his psyche of like what it is for an individual to really not accept that they're not truly special. They're not ahead of a pack. They're just an individual. But then it leads into, because the Julian McMahon character is killed, and it leads to Nicolas Cage looking at the beach bum who has the gun in his hand. There's a lot of weird imagery. There's a lot of psychedelic stuff with like Australian like wildlife and stuff like that. He gets bitten by a rat. He gets bitten by a snake. And what he ends up seeing is the beach bum, but it almost looks like the beach bum is the Nicolas Cage surfer character. So it leads into the ambiguity of, was Nicolas Cage ever really part of the group? Was he imagining all this? Is he like, got to a point where because he is so delusional about getting his house, getting his, son back and losing his wife, did it cause him to lose his sanity? Because you're watching people come to this Australian beach and they look at him funny. You watch a guy the surfer guy, his clothes become all disheveled and disgusting, and he's begging for coffee, and he's like upsetting the locals, and the police force don't want to deal with him because, he feels like he's unhinged, and it just, it feels like, the beach bum was actually Nicolas Cage's persona, and that he had kind of completely lost himself, and if you can interpret it that he kills himself, that he's happy at his point, he kills himself because he lost everything. We see a flashback to his father who also committed suicide at the exact same point where he's at. So it could be a traumatic situation. It could be a lot of things. It could be him just not willing to accept that he's lost everything. And even though people try to help him and try to, get him help and stuff like that, it just isn't enough. And it's just a guy who really loses complete self-worth. And I think that's what it's leading into. I think it's leading to a guy that just can't handle his situation, he can't move past the past, and it kind of comes back and bites him in the ass. And therefore he is willing to sacrifice himself. Because once again, he goes out to the beach, giant waves coming after him. His son disappears again. So was his son really there? Does he get killed in the wave, or was he the beach bum because he lives in the outside, he lives in the car when his car is taken. So like, I started wondering, is he the actual beach bum guy? Is he talking to himself? Because the way people talk to him, like, I've never seen you before, or the way people, interact with like the photographer girl, she just looks at him really weird. And like the way he takes a picture in front of the car, like, is that really his car, or is he just wanted a picture in front of the car? And then they write kook on his thing and they laugh at him, and it really feels like a guy who's going through a lot, to be fairly honest. It feels like a guy who was a beloved person on this beach. His father killed himself. He couldn't handle it. He either just went off and tried to be better and have a kid, and it fully ate at him. And I don't know. It's really interesting of a movie that I really kind of found captivating. It's not a very competent movie sometimes because it really tries to be weird for weird's sake. But I think like Mandy, it really leads into like an individual who loses everything, is willing to go for whatever he needs, and is not willing to accept failure. And when he eventually accepts failure, it kind of kicks him in the butt. So I don't know how much of that made sense, but that's how I feel about this movie. I think it's really fascinating. I think it's a good look into a man's psyche, about how torture and our past can like really affect us. And I think Nicolas Cage gives a fantastic performance. I think Julian McMahon gives a fantastic performance. And I think it's a movie that really is something truly different, which is what I truly like. It's a movie that will sit with me for a while. It's a movie that I was not expecting what I got. But the more and more I watch it, the more and more I realize it really is just a really interesting movie with a lot of interesting messages. But once again, this is my take on the movie. What is your take? We'll see. Let me know in the comments. But that'll be my spoiler discussion for The Surfer. Once again, it's a really interesting movie. So there you go. Anyways, with that said, thank you for checking out my spoiler discussion of The Surfer. I do appreciate it. In the comments below, what is your interpretation interpretation. Once again, my interpretation is going to be different than yours, I'm sure. But what is your interpretation of what happens in this movie? I'd love to read it. Find out what you think. But otherwise, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell. Top to find is coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. As always, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, guys.